A week after my son Michael's wedding, my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, knocked on my door. She was with an elegant man carrying a leather briefcase. "Mother-in-law, this is Paul the notary," she said with that fake smile I already knew so well. "We've come to help you with some little papers for the house." My heart pounded. I knew exactly what they were after, but they had no idea what I had been hiding all these months. Thank God I kept my mouth shut about the estate my late husband had left me. Because now, watching Vanessa look through my documents with those greedy eyes, I understood that my silence had been my salvation. But to tell this story properly, I need to go back to the day it all began to change. 3 months ago, when Michael told me he was marrying Vanessa, I was kneading bread in the kitchen. The aroma of fresh yeast filled the air, while my hands worked the warm dough. "Mom, I want you to really get to know Vanessa before the wedding," he told me with that smile that always melted my heart. My son, my only treasure, had finally found love. "Of course, honey. Bring her over whenever you want," I replied, wiping my hands on my apron. I had already heard so much about her. 32 years old, worked in an office, always perfect brown hair, flawless nails. She sounded like the ideal woman for my Michael. That afternoon, I rushed to the market to buy the freshest ingredients. Large shrimp, perfect avocados, poblano peppers, thick cream. I wanted to prepare his favorite dishes. In my mind, I already imagined the conversations we would have, the advice I could give her on how to make my son happy, the family recipes we would share. I spent all night cooking. My feet swelled from standing so long, but I didn't care. The main dish turned out perfect, creamy, and aromatic. The cornbread was as fluffy as clouds. The green salsa had that spicy kick that Michael had loved since he was little. When it was time to meet her, I put on my prettiest pink dress, the one I saved for special occasions. I carefully combed my hair and even put on lipstick. I wanted to make a good first impression. After all, this woman would be the mother of my future grandchildren. The doorbell rang, and my heart sped up with excitement. I opened the door with a huge smile. "Vanessa, what a pleasure to meet you," I exclaimed, extending my arms to hug her. But she barely brushed my shoulders with her fingertips, as if touching me was unpleasant. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," she murmured, not looking me in the eye. Her voice sounded cold, distant. She wore an elegant green dress and high heels that clicked against the floor of my humble home like little hammers. During dinner, I tried to talk with her about her interests, her job, her plans with Michael. But every question I asked received a sharp one-word answer. Yes. No. Maybe. It was like talking to a frozen wall. What hurt most was seeing how her eyes scanned my home with disdain. The way she wrinkled her nose when she tasted my food as if it were inferior. My specialty dish, which I had perfected for decades, she barely touched. "Mom, the food is delicious as always," Michael said, trying to fill the awkward silence that had settled over my table. Vanessa toyed with the beans on her plate, picking apart each ingredient as if it were poison. Her nails, perfectly painted bright red, contrasted with the simplicity of my ceramic dishes. "Do you like to cook, Vanessa?" I asked hopefully, pouring more sauce on her plate. She looked up with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "I don't have time for those things," she answered dryly. "I prefer to order food or go to decent restaurants." The word decent stabbed my chest like a splinter. My food wasn't decent. My house wasn't decent. Michael coughed nervously and changed the subject, but I had already gotten the message. To Vanessa, everything about me was inferior. Over the following weeks, every meeting became more difficult. When they came to visit, she would sit on the edge of the sofa, as if she were afraid to get dirty, constantly checking her phone with a bored expression. She never asked about my day. She never showed any interest in truly knowing me. "Alice, you must be happy you'll have more time for yourself when we get married, right?" she said one day while I was making coffee. Her words sounded like a premature goodbye, as if she had already decided to push my son away from me. "More time for me," I repeated, confused. "But I love spending time with you both." She exchanged a look with Michael that I didn't understand then, but which I understand perfectly now. They were already planning my exile. The wedding preparation became my personal nightmare. Vanessa made all the decisions without consulting me, as if I were invisible. The cleaning lady could help with the flowers, I heard her say on the phone one day. It took me several seconds to realize she was referring to me when I suggested making the wedding cake myself, a family tradition I had kept for generations. Vanessa let out a laugh that chilled my blood. "Oh no, mother-in-law, let's leave that to the professionals. We don't want it to turn out homemade." That night I cried in my kitchen, clutching the apron my mother had given me when I got married. My cakes had sweetened birthdays, baptisms, graduations. But to Vanessa, my love made into pastry was just homemade, a word she pronounced as if it were a disease. The wedding day arrived like an unavoidable storm. I got up before dawn to get ready, choosing my most elegant purple dress, the one I had bought especially for this occasion. I had my hair done at the neighborhood salon, where Linda gave me a beautiful style that took 10 years off me. "You look gorgeous, Alice," she said, looking at me in the mirror. "Your son is going to be so proud of you." Her words filled me with hope. Maybe this day would mark a new beginning with Vanessa. I arrived at the church early, as I always do. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect for my son. The guests began to arrive, and I received their congratulations with a genuine smile. "Michael looks so handsome, he looks so happy, you must be very proud." But when the ceremony began, I noticed something that broke my soul. Vanessa had arranged the seating in such a way that I was relegated to the 5th row, behind her work friends, behind neighbors who barely knew my son, the groom's mother in the 5th row like just another guest. From my seat, I had to stretch my neck to see my own son walk down the aisle. The mothers of Vanessa's friends, women who had never changed Michael's diaper or comforted him during his fevers, had better seats than I did. I swallowed hard and kept my composure, but something inside me began to break. During the reception, things got worse. Vanessa introduced me to her guests as Michael's mom, never as my mother-in-law or using my name. It was as if I were an object, a label with no personality. "She's the one who cooks really well," she would add with that fake smile, reducing my entire existence to a domestic function. When it was time for the toasts, I waited patiently for my turn. I had prepared beautiful words about my son, about how I had watched him grow, about my blessings for his new life. But Vanessa directed the ceremony like an orchestra conductor, giving the floor to her parents, her siblings, her best friends, even co-workers. "What about the groom's mom's toast?" someone among the guests asked. Vanessa looked toward where I was sitting and said with an icy smile, "Oh yes, of course, Alice, would you like to say something? Quick, quick." As if my 69 years of life and 30 years of being Michael's mother deserved only a brief comment. I stood up on trembling legs, feeling all eyes on me. "I want to thank God for this special day," I began, but I had barely spoken the second sentence when Vanessa started clapping, cutting off my speech. The others followed her lead, and my voice was lost in the forced applause. During dinner, they sat me at a table in the back with people I didn't know. Distant relatives of Vanessa who talked among themselves as if I didn't exist. From there, I watched my son laughing with his new political family, completely absorbed in his new life, while I chewed on chicken that tasted like cardboard. When the dancing started, Michael danced first with Vanessa, then with her mother, then with her sisters. I waited sitting, adjusting my dress over and over, making sure my smile didn't fade. But the song ended, and my son never turned toward where I was. "Aren't you going to dance with your mom?" my friend Anthony asked when he came over to greet me. Michael laughed nervously and said, "Oh yeah, sure, in a bit." But he kept dancing with other guests while I remained motionless at my table, feeling how every minute that passed made me more invisible. Around 11 at night, I decided to go say goodbye. I had to drive back home, and I was tired of pretending everything was fine. "Honey, I'm going to head out," I said, gently touching his arm. He hugged me quickly, distracted by the music and laughter. "Thanks for everything, Mom." "I love you," he murmured in my ear, but he was already looking away. Vanessa appeared at his side like a possessive shadow. "Thanks for coming, mother-in-law," she said, but her tone sounded more like a permanent farewell than gratitude. As I walked to my car, carrying my purse and the gift I had prepared with so much love, I heard Vanessa comment to her friends, "Oh, thank goodness she lives far away. Not that she's a bad person, but you know how mothers-in-law are. They always want to give their opinion on everything." Their laughter followed me to the parking lot. I got into my old car with shaking hands, feeling the tears welling up behind my eyes. For 30 years I had been the center of Michael's world, and in one night I had become an inconvenience to be discarded. The drive home felt endless. The highway lights blurred through the tears. I finally let run free. A romantic song played on the radio, reminding me of when I danced with my late husband at our own wedding so many years ago. He had promised to always protect me, but now I was alone, facing this new reality. I got home after midnight, my feet swollen and my heart shattered. I took off my shoes at the entrance and walked barefoot to my room, feeling the cold floor against my tired feet. The purple dress I had chosen with such care now seemed like a ridiculous costume, the uniform of an old woman who had tried to pretend she still mattered. The following days were a strange mixture of silence and expectation. I waited for Michael to call to tell me about his honeymoon, to ask how I was to maintain that connection we had had for 30 years. But my phone remained silent as a tomb. A week after the wedding, I decided to call him. "Hi, honey, how are you? How was the honeymoon?" I asked with the cheeriest voice I could fake. His response was curt, distant. "Great, Mom. Vanessa says hi. Listen, I'll talk to you later. We're busy settling some things with the house." The house? He no longer said my house or our house. It was the house, as if I had never existed in his domestic life. I hung up the phone, feeling more alone than ever, looking at the photographs of Michael as a child that decorated my living room. That little boy with bright eyes who would run to hug me every time I picked him up from school. Now he was a stranger who sent me greetings through his wife. 3 more days passed with no news. I decided to bake his favorite cookies, those chocolate chip cookies with walnuts that he loved. I'd take them over as an excuse to visit. I got ready, carefully put on my prettiest mint green blouse, and drove to their new house with a heart full of hope. I rang the doorbell, expecting to see my son smile. But who opened the door? It was Vanessa. She was wearing a wine-colored silk robe that looked expensive, her hair in a perfect bun, as if she had just left a salon. "Oh, mother-in-law, what a surprise," she said without a hint of genuine joy. "I brought cookies for Michael," I explained, lifting the basket I had decorated with a yellow ribbon. "They're his favorite." Vanessa took the basket without inviting me in, examining the cookies as if they were evidence of a crime. "What a nice thought Michael is in a very important meeting, but I'll tell him you stopped by." I stood on the doorstep like a rejected salesperson, waiting for at least an offer of a glass of water or a simple, "How are you?" But Vanessa was already closing the door. "Thanks for the cookies, mother-in-law. Have a great day." The slam of the door echoed in my ears like a final sentence. On the way home, tears blurred the windshield. I pulled over to the side of the road to cry, without restraint, hitting the steering wheel with my wrinkled fists. How had it come to this? How had I allowed that woman to snatch my son away from me so easily? That night, while eating dinner alone in front of the TV, I remembered something my late husband had told me shortly before he died. "Alice, if anything happens to me, don't let anyone walk all over you. You are stronger than you think, and you have more than you imagine." At the time, I didn't fully understand his words, but now they were starting to make sense. The next day, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. I reviewed the documents my husband had left me. I took the safe box from the closet, the one that held our most important papers, and began to organize them. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, the deed to the house insurance policies. It was then that I found the envelope that would change everything. Inside was the deed to a property I had completely forgotten about, a 500-acre estate that my husband had inherited from his uncle and which was now completely mine. The legal document was clear and indisputable. I was the sole owner of one of the most prosperous estates in the region. My heart raced as I read the details. The property included farmland, livestock, a 5-bedroom main house, and 3 employee houses. The estimated value in the most recent appraisal was enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life and leave a considerable inheritance. But the most important thing wasn't the money, it was the power. the power to decide my own destiny, to not depend on anyone, to not have to beg for affection or accept crumbs of attention. For the first time in weeks, I smiled genuinely. I put the documents in a safe place and made a decision. I wouldn't tell anyone about this inheritance, not Michael, and certainly not Vanessa. My instinct told me this would be my ace in the hole, my salvation when the right time came. That same week, my instinct proved to be sharper than I imagined. Vanessa started calling me with suspicious frequency. But not to ask how I was or to invite me to dinner. Her calls had a very specific purpose: to get information about my properties and my finances. "Mother-in-law Michael and I were thinking that maybe you'd be more comfortable in a smaller place," she said during one of those seemingly casual conversations. "This house must be a lot of responsibility for a person your age. Haven't you thought about selling it and moving to a more manageable apartment?" Her words sent a chill down my spine. The subtlety with which she suggested I get rid of my home was terrifying. "No, dear, I'm very comfortable here," I replied, maintaining a sweet tone. "This house holds many beautiful memories." "Yes, of course, but think about it. With the money from the sale, you could afford some luxuries, maybe travel, and we could help you manage that money so it stretches further." She insisted with that syrupy voice I had learned to detest. 2 days later, Michael visited me for the first time since the wedding. But he wasn't just coming to say hello to his mother. He came with a very clear agenda. "Mom, Vanessa and I have been talking about your future." He began sitting on the sofa where I used to cuddle him when he had nightmares. "My future?" I asked, feigning innocence, although I already knew exactly where this conversation was headed. My son avoided looking me directly in the eye, just like when he was a child and had done something wrong. "Yes, we think this house is too big for you. You seem very tired lately, very stressed. Vanessa knows a very good real estate agent who could advise you and get a good price," he explained nervously, playing with his car keys. The pain I felt in that moment was physical, as if a knife had been plunged into my chest. My own son, the boy I had raised with so much love, was trying to convince me to sell the house where he had grown up, where he had taken his first steps, where we had built all our memories together. "Michael, do you really think I should sell the house?" I asked him directly, needing to hear his answer without Vanessa's filter. For a moment, I saw the vulnerable boy he used to be, hesitating, struggling between what he knew was wrong and what his wife had put in his head. "It's just, Vanessa is right. You should enjoy life more, have fewer worries," he murmured, but his voice sounded rehearsed, as if he were reciting a script someone else had written. That night, after Michael left with empty promises to visit more often, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea and made a decision that would change everything. I called my friend Rachel, the only person I could completely trust. "Rachel, I need to tell you something very important, but I need you to promise me this stays between us," I said when she answered the phone. Her voice immediately turned serious. Rachel and I had been friends for over 40 years. We had practically raised our children together. "Of course, Alice. What's wrong? You sound worried." I told her everything, about Vanessa's attitude from day one, about how they had treated me at the wedding, about the attempts to convince me to sell my house, and finally about the inheritance of the estate that I had kept secret. "Good Lord, Alice, a 500-acre estate, and you haven't told them," Rachel exclaimed. "Thank goodness you kept your mouth shut. That girl looked like a shark from the moment I saw her at the wedding." Her words confirmed my instinct had been correct. "Rachel, I feel like something bad is going to happen. The way they look at me as if I'm an obstacle to be removed, I'm afraid they're planning something." "Listen to me carefully, friend," Rachel told me with that firmness that characterized her. "Tomorrow we are going to see a lawyer together. You need to protect all your assets before those vultures realize what you really have. And please do not sign anything, absolutely anything, without consulting me first." The next day, Rachel picked me up early. She had contacted a trusted lawyer, Robert, who had an office downtown, an older man with gray hair and intelligent eyes who had handled similar cases for decades. "Mrs. Alice, from what your friend tells me, you are in a very delicate situation," he explained after reviewing all my documents. "It's common for well-intentioned relatives or not so well-intentioned to pressure elderly people to transfer properties. My advice is that we legally protect all your assets." Robert spread all my documents on his mahogany desk, forming a mosaic of my financial life. "Mrs. Alice, what you have here is considerable. This estate alone is worth more than many entire family fortunes," he explained, pointing to the appraisal with his finger. "What worries me," he continued, adjusting his glasses, "is the pattern of behavior you're describing. First, they emotionally isolate the person. Then they make them feel incapable of managing their own affairs. Then they present the solution, which coincidentally benefits them." His words chilled my blood because they described exactly what I had been living. Rachel took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Tell him about the notary friend." Robert raised an eyebrow with interest. I told him about Vanessa's visit with Paul, about the little papers for the house, and how they had arrived unannounced, like hunters on the trail of prey. "Typical," the lawyer murmured, taking notes in his notebook. "They bring a notary, they trust someone willing to overlook irregularities, and they pressure you to sign documents under the premise of simplifying things." He explained that he had seen cases where elderly people lost their entire estate in a single signing session. "What can I do to protect myself?" I asked, feeling as if I were in the middle of an invisible battlefield. The lawyer smiled for the first time since our conversation began. "A lot. We can create an irrevocable trust. We can document any attempt at coercion. And above all, we can prepare for when they come with their true intentions." We left the lawyer's office with a clear plan and several documents that protected my assets. But more importantly, I left with the certainty that I wasn't crazy, that my suspicions were founded. Rachel invited me to her house for lunch, where her husband Anthony received me with his usual bear hug. "Alice, that girl has money in her eyes," Anthony told me as we ate the stew Rachel had prepared. "She gave me a bad feeling at the wedding. She spent the whole time calculating, seeing who had what, asking about people's businesses." His observations confirmed my worst fears. Over the next few days, I maintained my normal routine, but with my senses on high alert. Every phone call, every unexpected visit, every casual comment about my advanced age or my need for help, I interpreted with new clarity. It was as if I had developed X-ray vision to detect true intentions. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was watering my plants in the garden, I saw Michael's car arrive. My heart sped up, but no longer with joy, with apprehension. When he got out of the car, accompanied by Vanessa, I knew the moment I had been dreading had arrived. "Hi, Mom." Michael greeted me with that tense smile he had perfected since his marriage. Vanessa walked behind him, carrying a bulky folder and that air of smugness that irritated me so much. "Can we come in? We want to talk to you about something important." I invited them to sit in the living room, the same place where Michael had played with his toy cars for years, where I had read him stories every night, where we had watched his favorite cartoons together. Now that sacred space had become a courtroom, and I was the accused. "Mom, we've been very worried about you," Michael began with a paternalistic tone that felt completely alien. "Vanessa and I think you need help managing your financial affairs. It's normal at your age to feel overwhelmed by so many responsibilities." Vanessa opened her folder like a general unfolding battle maps. "Mother-in-law, we've spoken with several specialists in finance for seniors. They all agree that the best thing would be to simplify your estate, concentrate everything in safer, more manageable investments." "Specialists?" I asked, feigning confusion while my blood boiled inside. "What specialists? I haven't spoken to any specialists." My mind registered every word, every gesture, just as Robert had advised. "That's exactly why, Mom," Michael chimed in with that exaggerated patience one uses with small children. "You haven't had the proper guidance. Vanessa knows some very qualified people who can help you protect your money and secure your future." Vanessa pulled several documents from her folder, spreading them on my coffee table like poker cards. "Look, mother-in-law, we have a very convenient proposal here. An investment fund that would give you guaranteed returns. Much better than having money tied up in properties that require maintenance and give you headaches." I pretended to examine the papers with the tired eyes of a confused old woman, but I was actually memorizing every detail. The documents proposed the sale of my house and the transfer of the funds to a joint account where Michael and Vanessa would have decision-making power over my investments, to protect me from potential scams. And where would I live if I sell the house? I asked with a trembling voice, perfectly playing the role of the vulnerable grandmother they expected to see. Vanessa smiled with that fake sweetness she had perfected. "Oh, mother-in-law, don't you worry about that. We've already found a very nice retirement home with 24-hour medical care. You would be much safer and more comfortable." A retirement home. The words echoed in my head like funeral bells. There was their complete plan: strip me of my house, control my money, and lock me up in an institution where I couldn't be a bother to their perfect new life, all wrapped in the golden paper of concern and filial love. A retirement home. I repeated, letting my voice crack slightly. "But Michael, I feel fine here in my house. All our memories are here." Vanessa and Michael exchanged that complicit look I had learned to detect that silent communication between conspirators. "Mom, we know it's hard, but think about it," Michael insisted, leaning toward me with that condescending smile. "In the home, you'd have company activities, medical attention, and we could visit you whenever we wanted without worrying about your safety." Whenever they wanted. Not every day, not regularly, but when it was convenient for them, like visiting a pet in a kennel. I felt a rage so intense that I had to concentrate on maintaining my performance of a helpless old woman. "Besides," Vanessa added, pulling more papers from her infinite folder, "we've calculated that with the sale of this house and some smart investments, you could live very comfortably without worrying about anything. We would take care of all the paperwork and financial decisions." There it was, the final trap. They would control my money while I vegetated in an asylum waiting for their sporadic visits and being grateful for the crumbs of attention they gave me. It was a brilliantly cruel plan executed with the precision of financial surgeons. "And what if I don't want to sell the house?" I asked in a small voice, as if the idea had just occurred to me. Vanessa sighed theatrically, like a patient teacher explaining math to a slow child. "Mother-in-law, we understand it's hard to accept, but at your age it's not safe to live alone in such a big house. What if you fall and there's no one to help you? Or if someone takes advantage of your kindness and scams you?" She argued with that seemingly irrefutable logic. The irony of her words would have made me laugh if I wasn't so furious. She, who was trying to scam me at that very moment, was warning me about potential scammers. The audacity was astonishing. "I need time to think about it," I murmured, rubbing my temples as if I had a headache. "It's a lot to process at once." Michael stood up and gave me a hug that felt more like the kiss of Judas than a gesture of affection. "Of course, Mom. Take all the time you need. But not too long, okay? These investment opportunities don't wait forever," he said, while Vanessa gathered her documents with the satisfaction of someone who knows they've already won the game. After they left, I sat in my living room feeling as if I had survived a hurricane. My hands were shaking not from old age, but from contained rage. I picked up the phone and immediately called Robert. "Robert, they came today, just as you predicted. They want me to sell everything and go to an asylum while they manage my money," I reported in a choked voice. His response was calm but firm. "Mrs. Alice, now comes the most important part. Do not sign anything, no matter how much they pressure you, and if possible, record any future conversation you have with them. We need to document their true intentions." I couldn't sleep that night. I walked through my house like a ghost, touching each piece of furniture, each photograph, each object that had a story. The rocking chair where I had nursed Michael, the table where we had done his elementary school homework together, the piano I had played to lull him to sleep when he had nightmares. All of it would be sold, auctioned off, scattered to the winds, to feed the greed of a woman who hadn't even known my son when he was truly vulnerable. A woman who saw my motherly love only as an obstacle to her plans for financial greatness. The next day, Rachel arrived early with a digital recorder her grandson had lent her. "Friend, this is very easy to use. You just press this button, and it records for up to 8 hours straight," she explained, showing me the small device. "Put it in your purse or the pocket of your apron. If they come back with their proposals, we'll have their every word recorded." For 3 days, I maintained a tense calm, waiting for my hunter's next move. On Friday afternoon, the phone rang. It was Vanessa, with that syrupy voice she had perfected for manipulation. "Mother-in-law, have you had time to think about our proposal? It's just that we found a beautiful spot at the retirement home, but we need to reserve the spot soon because there's a waiting list." The artificial urgency in her voice confirmed they were anxious to close the deal before I could reflect too much or consult with anyone else. "Yes, dear, I've been thinking a lot," I replied with my best indecisive old woman performance. "Could you come tomorrow to explain all the details again? At my age, I sometimes forget things." I could almost feel her triumphant smile through the phone. "Of course, mother-in-law. We'll stop by tomorrow afternoon with all the papers. You'll see it's the best decision for everyone." For everyone, as if being stripped of my home and my autonomy was an act of generosity toward my executioners. On Saturday afternoon, they arrived punctual as vultures arriving for carrion. This time, they were accompanied by Paul the notary, who had appeared at my door a week earlier. A thin man with a sparse mustache and a leather briefcase who examined my house with the eyes of an appraiser while feigning politeness. "Mrs. Alice, what a pleasure to see you again." Paul greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've come prepared to facilitate all the necessary procedures. The faster we resolve this, the fewer complications we'll have." My recorder was on in my apron pocket, capturing every word of this legal farce. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had rocked Michael as a baby, and I let them unfold their theater of false concerns. "Mom, we brought all the documents ready," Michael announced, spreading a pile of papers on my table. "You just need to sign here, here, and we'll take care of everything else." His finger pointed to dotted lines as if they were crosses in a cemetery. Vanessa sat next to me with that forced closeness that aggressive salespeople use. "Mother-in-law, look how wonderful. Here are the photos of the home where you'll live. It has beautiful gardens, a TV room, even yoga classes for seniors." The photographs showed a place that looked more like a disguised hospital than a home. Paul opened his briefcase ceremoniously and took out an official seal blue ink and several forms with a notary's letterhead. "Ma'am, these documents are perfectly drafted to protect your interests. The sale of the property, the transfer of funds to the family trust, and the authorization for your relatives to manage your finances in case of incapacitation." Incapacitation. That word hit me like a slap. They had even prepared the next step, declaring me mentally incompetent if I ever rebelled against their decisions. It was a plan so meticulous it gave me chills. "And what if I changed my mind later?" I asked with a trembling voice, perfectly playing my role as a confused old woman. Paul and Vanessa exchanged a look that the recorder couldn't capture, but that I registered in my memory as evidence of their complicity. "Oh, mother-in-law, these decisions are final for your own protection," Vanessa explained with that exaggerated patience. "If we could change our minds all the time, any ill-intentioned person could confuse you and make you sign things that aren't in your best interest." Ill-intentioned. The irony was so brutal I had to bite my tongue to keep from exploding. There she was, stripping me of everything while warning me about people who might take advantage of me. "Besides, Mom," Michael added, taking my hand with a tenderness I knew was fake, "think about how peaceful we'll be, knowing you're safe and well cared for. We won't have to worry about you anymore. We won't have to worry about you." Translated from the language of manipulators, it meant, we won't have to pretend to love you now that we have your money. The tears that welled up in my eyes were not an act. They were the genuine pain of a mother betrayed by the son she had raised with so much love. "Don't cry, ma'am." Paul consoled me with professional coldness. "It's normal to feel emotional about these changes, but you'll see that you'll feel much calmer afterward." He took a gold pen from his jacket and placed it in front of me as if it were a gun. I took the pen with shaking hands and brought it close to the first document. I could feel the tension in the air, the expectation of my tormentors waiting for their moment of final triumph. Vanessa leaned toward me like a thirsty vampire about to bite. But then, as if sent by a guardian angel, my doorbell rang. "Are you expecting someone?" Paul asked, clearly irritated. "No," I murmured, rising slowly. "It must be a neighbor." I opened the door and there was Rachel, accompanied by Robert and another man I didn't recognize. "Good afternoon, Alice." Rachel greeted me with a smile that instantly gave me strength. "I hope we're not interrupting." "Not at all," I replied, feeling as if the cavalry had just arrived. "Please come in." Robert entered with that authoritative presence that only experienced lawyers have, and the unknown man followed him, carrying a professional video camera. Michael turned pale when he saw the newcomers. Vanessa tried to quickly gather the documents, but Paul froze like a statue of salt. "What's going on here, Mom?" my son asked with a nervous voice. "Good afternoon, everyone," Robert said with professional courtesy. "I am Mrs. Alice's attorney. I'm so glad I arrived just in time to supervise this important legal transaction. I imagine all the documents are in perfect order and that my client has had sufficient time to review them with independent legal counsel." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Paul put his gold pen away as if it were burning him, and Vanessa glanced at the door as if calculating the shortest escape route. "Excuse me, and you are?" Paul asked, trying to regain his professional authority. Robert smiled that smile he had perfected over decades of unmasking con artists. "Robert Mendoza, attorney specializing in asset protection for seniors, and this is Mr. Anthony Herrera from the District Attorney's Office Elder Abuse Division. We just happened to be reviewing some similar cases in the area and decided to pay a courtesy visit." Vanessa's face transformed from predatory confidence to the paleness of terror in seconds. Paul closed his briefcase with nervous movements as if the documents inside were incriminating evidence. Michael stood motionless, looking back and forth between the lawyers and me as if he were truly seeing me for the first time in months. "Robert," I said, addressing him with the firmest voice I had used in weeks, "I'm so glad you're here. I was just about to sign some documents, and I wanted to make sure everything was in order." I took the recorder out of my pocket and placed it on the table like a grenade with the pin pulled. Mr. Herrera turned on his camera and began recording. "Ma'am, could you please explain to us what kind of documents they were asking you to sign and under what circumstances?" His voice had that legal authority that makes the guilty tremble. Vanessa tried to interrupt with a forced laugh. "Oh, officer, I think there's a misunderstanding. We were just helping my mother-in-law with some paperwork for her own convenience." But her voice sounded like shattering glass. "Paperwork," I repeated with a smile that surprised even me. "You call it paperwork to try to make me sell my house hand over all my money and put me in an asylum so you can manage my estate." The words shot out of me like accurate projectiles. Paul stood up abruptly, trying to escape. "I think there's a misunderstanding. I just came to offer notary services." But Mr. Herrera discreetly blocked his path to the door. "One moment, colleague," he told him with that cold courtesy prosecutors use. "I'd like to review those documents you brought. It's part of an investigation we're conducting into real estate fraud." It was then that I decided to play my winning card. I went to my bedroom and returned with the safe box containing the deed to the estate. I opened it ceremoniously in front of everyone, enjoying every second of the growing confusion on my predators' faces. "Look how curious," I said, spreading the deed on the table. "It turns out my late husband left me a small inheritance that I had forgotten to mention. A 500-acre estate with a value of, well, Robert, could you read them the updated appraisal?" Robert took the document with a smile that was pure poetic justice. "According to the most recent appraisal, the property has a market value of $4.2 million plus livestock, agricultural machinery, and additional buildings." The silence that followed was so absolute you could hear my heart beating. Vanessa's jaw had dropped like a fish out of water. Michael stared at the document as if it were an alien object. $4.2 million, I repeated, savoring every word. "And to think you were so worried about my poverty and my inability to manage my finances. How very considerate." My voice dripped sarcasm like bitter honey. Paul tried one last desperate maneuver. "Ma'am, this changes everything. Obviously, you need specialized advice to manage an estate of that magnitude." But Mr. Herrera was already taking pictures of all the documents he had brought. "You're right," I replied with a radiant smile. "That's why I hired Robert a week ago. He is already handling all my legal and financial affairs. But thank you for your concern." Vanessa finally found her voice, though it sounded like the caw of an injured crow. "Mother-in-law, we didn't know. I mean, we just wanted to help you." Her excuses crumbled like sandcastles in the rain. "Help me," I asked, rising from my armchair with a dignity I had forgotten I possessed. "Help me by selling my house without consulting me. Help me by putting me in an asylum against my will. Help me by stealing control of my own life." Michael finally spoke, and for the first time in months, I recognized my real son in his voice. "Mom, we thought it was for the best." There were tears in his eyes, but I no longer knew if they were from genuine repentance or from frustration at having lost the game. "The best for me," I repeated softly, "would have been if you had asked me what I wanted. The best for me would have been if you had respected my decisions. The best for me would have been if you had continued to see me as your mother, not as an obstacle to your happiness." Robert approached me and put a protective hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Alice, I think it's time for these people to leave. We have enough documented material to proceed legally if necessary." Paul practically ran to the door, closely followed by Vanessa, who no longer bothered to maintain her mask of a concerned daughter-in-law. Michael stayed a few seconds longer, looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Mom," he murmured, "can we talk later?" For the first time in months, his question sounded genuine, with no hidden agenda. I nodded slowly, but without committing to anything. After they left, I remained in my living room, surrounded by my true allies, Rachel, Robert, and Mr. Herrera. For the first time in months, I felt truly safe in my own home. 3 months later, I am sitting on the porch of my estate, watching the sunset paint the sky orange over my lands. Michael comes to visit me once a week alone, trying to rebuild the relationship he almost destroyed, to please a woman who only saw him as a means to get wealth. Vanessa tried to contact me several times, but her calls go straight to voicemail. They say she divorced Michael when she realized I wasn't the poor, helpless widow she had imagined. Now I help advise other elderly women facing similar situations. My house has become a refuge where they can come to tell their stories and receive free legal advice. Because I learned that silence can be golden, but raising your voice at the right time can be diamond. At 69, I finally understood my husband's last words. I had more than I imagined, and I was stronger than I believed. 6 months after that afternoon that changed my life forever, I find myself sitting on the terrace of my estate with a steaming cup of coffee in my hands. I'm watching the sun rise over my 500 acres of freedom. The aroma of freshly ground coffee mixes with the scent of the orange blossoms I planted last week, creating a symphony of smells that reminds me every morning why it was worth fighting. The main house of the estate has become something I never imagined, a sanctuary for women like me. Every week I receive letters, calls, and visits from ladies who have heard my story and recognize their own nightmare in it. "Mrs. Alice," they tell me with trembling voices, "my daughter-in-law also wants me to sell my house." Or, "My son tells me I can't manage my money anymore." Yesterday, Linda arrived, a 73-year-old widow whose children had managed to get a judge to declare her incompetent to manage her assets. She arrived carrying a small suitcase and the enormous weight of family betrayal. "Mrs. Alice," she told me through tears, "my own children are holding me prisoner in my own home. They take my pension. They don't let me go out alone. They say it's for my own good." I sat her in the same rocking chair where I used to cry in my loneliness. I served her chamomile tea in a fine china cup and told her my full story. I watched her eyes fill with hope for the first time in months. "Can I really regain control of my life?" she asked me with the voice of a lost child finding her way home. "Not only can you," I replied, taking her wrinkled hands in mine, "you have the right to, and you are not alone in this fight." The next day, Robert reviewed her case, and we discovered that the declaration of incompetence had legal irregularities that could be reversed. Linda now smiles every day, and her children have had to return the money they had taken to protect. My story spread like wildfire throughout the region. Journalists have come to interview me. Social workers invite me to give talks, and I have received letters from places as far away as Spain and Argentina. "Your courage inspired me to defend my rights," wrote a lady from Chicago. "Thanks to your example, my family no longer treats me as if I'm invisible." Another thanked me from Buenos Aires. "But not everything has been easy." Michael comes to visit me every Sunday alone, trying to rebuild the bridges his wife dynamited. The first conversations were clumsy, full of awkward silences and apologies that sounded rehearsed. Gradually, I have seen the boy I knew reappear behind the eyes of the man who had allowed me to be betrayed. "Mom," he said 2 weeks ago as we walked among the stables, "I don't know how to apologize for what I did. It was like I was hypnotized, like I couldn't see the obvious." His tears were genuine, and for the first time since his wedding, I recognized my real son. "Michael," I replied, stopping to look him directly in the eye, "forgiveness isn't asked for, it's earned, and it's earned with actions, not words." He nodded solemnly, understanding that reconciliation would be a long process that required patience and constant proof of his repentance. Vanessa, for her part, disappeared from our lives as quickly as she had arrived. According to what Rachel told me, who has contacts everywhere, she tried to sue Michael for half of his assets in the divorce. But she found that my son had legally protected all his assets following my advice. She left town without saying goodbye, probably in search of her next victim. Paul, the corrupt notary, lost his professional license after Mr. Herrera presented evidence of his participation in fraud schemes against seniors. The recording of our conversation was key to dismantling a network that had scammed dozens of elderly people in the region. Rachel continues to be my partner in adventure. She now lives in one of the employee houses on the estate, but not as an employee. She is my chosen sister. Together we manage the refuge we've created, organize workshops on elder rights, and plan trips we never had the chance to take when we were young. "Who would have thought that at 70 we'd become activists?" she asked me yesterday while we were reviewing legal aid requests that had arrived by mail. I smiled, remembering the timid woman I was a year ago, the one who settled for crumbs of attention and allowed others to decide her fate. Robert has become more than my lawyer. He is the legal director of our foundation. We have managed to change local laws that better protect seniors, and we are working with national legislators for broader reforms. "Mrs. Alice," he told me at our last meeting, "you have done more for elder rights in 6 months than many organizations have in decades." Every night before sleeping, I walk through the estate gardens and reflect on the journey. Sometimes I find letters that the women who have stayed here leave in the special mailbox we installed under the largest oak tree. "Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to reclaim my dignity," one wrote. "Thank you for showing me that self-worth has no expiration date," said another. "Tomorrow, a group of ladies is arriving from Texas who want to hear our story and learn how to create similar refuges in their cities." The movement is spreading like ripples in a pond, touching lives I never imagined I could reach. At 70, I have discovered that old age is not the end of the story. It can be the beginning of the most powerful chapter. I have learned that the wisdom accumulated over decades is a more powerful weapon than youth, and that lost dignity can always be recovered if we have the courage to fight for it. My name is Alice. I am 70 years old, and this is my Declaration of Independence. I will never again allow anyone to make me feel invisible, useless, or disposable. And if my story can inspire just one woman to raise her voice against mistreatment, then every tear, every betrayal, and every moment of pain will have been worth it. Because in the end, I discovered my late husband was right. I was stronger than I believed, and I had much more than I imagined. I just needed to remember who I really was.